Welcome to WiseTake.com. This is CK013. You can find me on Twitter at CK_013. And yes, we are bringing you another NBA DFS podcast. It is Monday, March 20th, 2017. We've got 7 awesome games to talk about. Headline yet again by Russell Westbrook and James Harden. We got 2 of the biggest studs in the game, both squaring off tonight. And both appear to be in pretty good matchups on paper. The weekend did not treat me so good in the DFS world. I was one of the people that was burned by the Cavs resting the big three against the Clippers, and I actually was taking a chance that Kyrie wouldn't play. I know he left the previous game with a knee injury, so I assumed he wasn't going to play. I think I made 5 lineups that day, which is small. On the weekends I go light. And I made 5 lineups on Saturday, and 4 of them had LeBron James. And those of you that follow me on Twitter, I'm sure you can sense my frustration. I was very vocal about it. I even tweeted DraftKings, talking to them about why late swap is important for not only the professionals, but more importantly, it's more important, I think, for the casual players. Because honestly, the professionals might have had time to dig up research, and they may have been able to figure out, okay, these guys, word is they might rest. But if you're a casual player and, you're basically just using Twitter and maybe a couple sites of news once in a while to check throughout the day if he's playing, that was a big surprise to you. And realistically, I know it was a big surprise to everybody. I don't think anybody really had a clue they were going to rest. There was no murmurs of it at all. Some people may have looked at the line and and said, okay, well, you should have known this game was going to get canceled. But as you can see, that wasn't accurate, because once they were ruled out, the line went from the Clippers -3 to the Clippers -12. So obviously that wasn't necessarily a good indication. But either way, late swap's not here, and some people are going to be uncomfortable with that. But you know what? On FanDuel, they don't have late swap at all. So I think that was a big benefit for people playing DraftKings. And the fact that they took it away, you're starting to really see the effects, especially late in the season. This is a point in the season where teams will spontaneously rest guys. Some teams have nothing to play for, so they're going to rest their guys to make sure they're fresh for next year. Some guys don't want to play because they're coming into free agency and they're not going anywhere this year, so they'd rather just take it easy. And then also you got some guys who they're going to the playoffs, so they want their guys rested because their seed is pretty much locked up, or maybe they're not concerned about the seeding. So it's very risky this time of year. And baseball cannot come quick enough for people like me. I'm ready for baseball. Don't get me wrong, I love basketball, but it's just we're at that point in the season where things become a lot more risky. And yeah, so the weekend in general, right now it's 11:58 on the East Coast. The Lakers and the Cavs are still going. I made a lot of stacks of that game. I went right back to Cleveland, even though they disappointed me. And unfortunately for me, I have one lineup that's cashing. It was not a good day. Not a good weekend for me as far as DFS, but a great weekend in life. I can tell you that. I definitely enjoy my weekends, and I got a close friend and 2 close friends of mine who are in from Phoenix. They're going to be here another week or so. So the schedule for the podcast might be a little off this week again, but you got to live right. As Adam Levitan always says, you got to smell the roses, right? You got to enjoy life a little bit. One thing my wife always says to me is, you work to live. You don't live to work. So even if it's something you enjoy, like for me, something I do enjoy, I enjoy these podcasts, I enjoy working on WiseTake, I enjoy DFS, but you need a break. Life is all about the balance, and you got to find it for yourselves one way or another. Anyway, enough about that stuff. You guys don't watch me to talk about life. You watch me or listen to me to talk about DFS. So without further ado, let's get into the injuries. We got a lot of them, and there's only 7 games, which 7 games is a decent amount, but I've seen 12 game slates with less injuries going into the night than we have today. Anyway, Rodney Hood is questionable with a knee against Indiana. Shelvin Mack is questionable with an ankle against Indiana. Derek Favors is expected to be out with a knee at Indiana. Jahlil Okafor is questionable with a knee. He got hurt in his last game. They're playing Orlando. Justin Anderson is doubtful with an illness against Orlando. Vooch is questionable with his Achilles. I understand he did not practice on Sunday. They got a matchup at home against Philly. Jody Meeks is probable to make his return. He's been out for a long time with a thumb injury. Bazemore is expected to be out with a knee issue at Charlotte. Paul Millsap is expected to be out with a knee issue at Charlotte. Dunleavy, we know, is still out with his ankle. Plumlee is out for the for Charlotte with a calf injury. Sessions is still out with a knee. Markieff Morris is actually questionable with an illness. He didn't play in his last couple games because of this illness, so we'll see if he plays with his matchup against Boston. IT2 is still questionable with a knee. He's missed 2 games. We were told he was going to miss 2 games, so I would expect him to come back, but you got to have to pay attention. We don't know for sure. He's listed as questionable. Danilo Gallinari is doubtful with a knee at Houston. Chandler doubtful with a groin at Houston. Darrell Arthur has already been ruled out with a knee at Houston. And Kristaps Porzingis is now probable with a thigh. He was doubtful originally, but now apparently he went out and said he was going to play. So they bumped him up to probable against the Clippers. Excuse me. So that's the injury news we have for today. So now we're going to go ahead and dive in position by position. As always, point guard is super loaded, and it's loaded in a way that we haven't probably seen in a while. It's really, really loaded. But we have a couple of things to talk about. As usual, we're going to spend a lot of time on point guards, just because, in my opinion, that appears to be the most loaded position. And the reason I think it's important is because you have to get this right. I think that with point guard, there's such a discrepancy in the scoring of a lot of these point guards on any given night. We see all these guys in great matchups dud. We see guys in great matchups do great. And even some guys in bad matchups end up doing great. So you don't want to miss on point guard. They're typically one of your highest scorers on the slate. I'm not saying it's going to be the case this time because it's not always the case. But in a lot of cases, we see the point guard is crucial. We know that. And they're the guys with the ball in their hands more than anybody else. They're the guys that typically get rebounds. They typically get assists and points. So you get the triple threat factor, whereas some other positions like small forwards maybe only get points, or shooting guards are relying on points, or maybe they're relying on rebounds like some other power forwards. But point guards you can't miss, and we know that. Russell Westbrook is 13-3 on DraftKings. Most expensive guy, and of course the highest raw projected player on the slate, as he is every time he goes. He's 13-3. He's at home against Golden State. Now I want you guys to remember, listen, there's no Durant here. So I don't think that's going to make Westbrook play any less. They're still a division rival, still a team that he wants to beat. And there's no Durant. So I think the things might be a little even as far as Westbrook is concerned. What I'm concerned about here, there is some risk. For those of you that follow me on Twitter, you saw I posted up some pictures of the last time these two teams met, and Zaza completely knocked down Russell Westbrook and stood over him, basically taunting him. And at the time, my issue was, why didn't his teammates help him? But today, the issue is, what is Westbrook going to do? Because he did say after that game, he said he didn't see that, he didn't know that happened, but he did say he's going to get him back. So I do have a little bit of concern. I want to play Westbrook. I'm going to play him. If I play multiple lineups, I will have multiple lineups with Westbrook. The issue, of course, is I'm a little concerned he might do something to get himself kicked out of the game. And that could be silly. I would hope Westbrook's a better professional than that. But obviously, Westbrook is somebody who takes it very serious. He's somebody that takes things personally. You could see the way he treats Durant this year, that he takes things very personally. So he's a guy that doesn't like to be made look bad. And I'm a little concerned he might go after Zaza. And I mean, if anything, if they want to get him back, I wouldn't condone any violence. Obviously, this is basketball. We just want to watch some basketball. But I would hope that they would at least have maybe one of the younger players, or maybe the players that aren't so involved, do something about that rather than have Westbrook do it. But Westbrook seems like the kind of guy that would prefer to take matters into his own hands. So just keep that in mind. Is he in a phenomenal spot? Yeah, the total's high. The spread is great. Golden State hasn't looked all that great, although they did look good against Orlando. In general, they have not looked all that great. And Westbrook has been playing just phenomenally since the All-Star break. I mean, he has all season, let's be real. So I love Westbrook. I do. I always love Westbrook. Fuego Steve always tells us about how over 50% of winning GPP lineups on Westbrook slates, Westbrook is on that lineup. So he's a guy that I think you have to consider, of course, but just keep in mind that there's some extra things riding here. And I am a little bit concerned. It's going to be a popular game. I would imagine Westbrook will be popular, although we do have James Harden, who can make things interesting as far as the ownership game, because he's slightly cheaper, and yet he is also in probably an even better matchup when you consider the fact that Denver's defense is way worse than Golden State's. But yeah, so you got some things to consider. This isn't a situation where there is no risk. Westbrook has probably the highest floor out of any player that you'll ever see. But But that floor could be a lot lower if he decides to do something crazy in the first quarter and get himself kicked out or whatever. I'm sure the refs are going to be watching for that. So just keep that in mind. But I'm not telling you not to play Westbrook. I'm just telling you to have some consideration. There is some narrative into this. And while we love narratives, we wouldn't want this narrative to go too far as to get him kicked out of the game. So just keep that in mind. Excuse me. I'm coming down with something. James Harden, 12-7 at home. Matchup against Denver. They just played Denver a couple days ago. It's a home and home. And he got 73.5 DraftKings points against them in Denver. That was on the back end of a back-to-back. And it was a close game. They pulled it out 109-105. He played 37 minutes. It was the back end of a back-to-back in Denver. That's like literal death for most of these NBA teams. And Harden went in there and got it done. And the Joker had a horrible game, but we'll talk about that later. But, yeah, James Harden at 12-7. His price only went up 300. This is an even better spot for him. He's got a day of rest, and he's home. Of course, you do have to have a little bit of concern for the blowout because if Harden was able to win in Denver on the back end of a back-to-back in that high altitude, what do you think he'll do to them at home? So there's something to consider there. I do like Harden a lot, but like I said, the point guards are loaded today, and one of the benefits of Harden is you could play him at shooting guard as well. John Wall, 9-6 against Boston. If Isaiah Thomas plays, I'll like John Wall a lot more, but if Marcus Smart is going to give it a go again, his defense is obviously a lot better than that. But at 9-6, John Wall certainly in play. I think his ownership will be low just because of the fact that, one, he hasn't been showing too much of his ceiling lately, and two, because there's Westbrook and Harden on the slate. So I feel like people, if you're at 9-6, I think people would rather pay down to Steph Curry, who's $200 cheaper, against Westbrook, or they'd rather just pay all the way up for Harden or Westbrook. So I think John Wall could go under the radar, even though he's in a pretty good matchup. You got Chris Paul, 884. We got skipped over Steph Curry. He's 9-4. We know Curry and Clay play with a huge usage bump without Durant. However, Curry has kind of failed to really show his upside. I mean, he's gotten over 40 DraftKings points in 4 out of his last 5, but his price has been just under 10,000 in those matchups, so it's not exactly, you're looking for him to hit 50. He's hit 50 once, and that's it. And it was exactly 50 DraftKings points, and that was against Philly. So, and he just had a homestand, 3 games at home. Now he's hitting the road. It's an important game. Emotions will be high, so I definitely think you can't ignore a guy like Curry. But as you can see, it's going to be tough to make these decisions. It will. Chris Paul's 8,400 against the Knicks. The Knicks haven't been the best team to target point guards against. However, Chris Paul is probably an exception to that rule. Chris Paul's coming off a horrible game. He wasn't needed. His team destroyed the Cavs because the Cavs decided to rest everybody. That's just what they decided to do. Chris Paul only played 27 minutes. He was 0 for 8 from the field, 0 for 5 from the three-point line. He had 5 actual points, and I think they all came from free throws. He did have 4 rebounds and 7 assists. But obviously, because Chris Paul, I think, was kind of taking it easy, and he won't be taking it easy against the Knicks. This is a game they need, and they're still playing hard. They're still playing to win. And the Knicks, they're a horrible defensive team, but the Clippers have not been playing all that well. So while right now, looking at this, I would expect the Clippers to be favored huge, and I would expect this to be a blowout. There's also reasons to think maybe this game would be a little bit closer. The Knicks are a bad team. There's really nothing good to say about the Knicks, although I think Porzingis is probable, so that should help the chances. Not necessarily a good matchup for them. They're on the West Coast, but the Clippers haven't looked all that great lately, especially Blake and Chris Paul specifically. They have not looked all that great. So at 8,400, I definitely think that he's going to go under the radar. Nobody's going to play Chris Paul. They're going to prefer to play Steph Curry, John Wall, Harden, Westbrook. Nobody's going to play Paul, especially not because I think they're going to see that the Knicks are ranked. They have a pretty good DVP against point guards this season, and when you look on DraftKings under that opponent ranking, you see a red 5. So I just don't think Chris Paul is going to be a primary target. IT2 is only 8,200. If he plays, I would certainly be interested in getting some exposure to him just because of his price. He's super cheap. Now, he's another guy that even before he got hurt, since Bradley's been back, he's been kind of failing to kind of show a ceiling. But we know what he's capable of. He's had a couple of days off for, obviously, his injured knee. So if he's cleared to play and he comes back with a vengeance, I think he could have a good game. And believe it or not, point guards have actually had a lot of success against the Wizards lately. That has not been the case all season. John Wall has showed us pretty good defense, but lately he's been struggling a little bit, so that's worth considering as well. Kemba Walker, 7,900 against Atlanta. I love targeting point guards against Atlanta, and we all know about Kemba's home and road splits. Kemba's had 2 rough games, but overall he's played well. In 2 games against Atlanta, he's averaging 42.1 DraftKings points. and that's on 38.2% shooting. So if his shooting is a little better, that's around over his last couple of games, he's really struggled to shoot the ball, but his assist numbers have been fairly consistent except for these last 2 games. He did have some tough matchups. He played on the road against Indiana. It was a complete blowout. He only saw 30 minutes, and he got 13.25 DraftKings points. And then against Washington, against John Wall, Wall, he can be a pretty good defender, and I think the issue is Kemba's shooting. Kemba shot 5 for 18 overall. That's 27.8% from the field. That's not going to get you a lot. And his whole team was kind of struggling. It was a low-scoring game. He had 6 assists, 2 rebounds. That's it. So I expect Kemba to bounce back big. He's at home. He's got a matchup with Schroeder. I'm not afraid of that matchup. So I definitely expect Kemba to bounce back in a pretty big way. And he's 7,900. That's super cheap, I think, for him at home in this matchup. Elf on the shelf. You got to love the way the Elf's been playing lately. We know what his upside is. He put up a 70 burger not too long ago, and then shortly after that put up a 50 burger. So we know what he's capable of. His price is 78. It's still down from his matchup with Phoenix, and that's because they're at home against Philly. Philly's on the back end of a back-to-back, and McConnell's a decent defender. What I like the most about the Elf is he's not scoring dependent, right? Like, he's more so dependent on his assist numbers and his rebound numbers. And I think I feel comfortable playing him today. He's 7,500, so if you want to avoid, or if you have room maybe to pay up for another guard in the guard slot or the utility slot, I would certainly consider Elf. This guy's got some serious upside. Now, I don't want to say he has Westbrook upside, but he certainly has, 70 DraftKings points. That's pretty good. So yeah, his floor might be significantly lower than Harden or Westbrook, but he's shown us that his ceiling can be pretty good. And at that price point, I would rather have a 70 burger from Elf at 7,500 than even a 75 from Westbrook at 13.3. I'll tell you that. Not saying to play Elf over Westbrook. I'm just saying it's worth considering the Elf. Schroeder is 7,100. We have no Millsap, so we're going to have to see. Millsap is out. We're going to have to see how that goes. Now, Schroeder hasn't looked so good lately. To be honest, I don't think it's so much him that hasn't looked good as much as his coach just hasn't liked the way he's been playing. Out of his last 4 games, he only played more than 30 minutes once. And against Memphis, the first time, he played Memphis twice. The first time at Memphis, he played in 29 minutes. That's it. I think he got benched in the fourth quarter. Still got 40.25 DraftKings points without playing an entire quarter. Imagine what he could have done if he played in the fourth. Now, against Memphis, the second time, he played 26 minutes. He shot 25% from the floor, ended up with 22.25, and he did get benched in the fourth quarter again. Against Portland, he shot 2 for 14 from the field. That's 14.3. That's just horrible for an NBA player. In 28 minutes, that's all he played was 28 minutes. Game was a blowout. He got 29.75 DraftKings points. That wasn't a great matchup against Lillard. So there is some concern because his price actually went up despite 2 bad performances and despite the fact that his matchup was way better against Portland. I'm a little surprised to see his price jump up. However, we should expect at least a little bit of a usage bump. I haven't ran the numbers just yet, but we should expect at least a little bit of a usage bump with Schroeder now that Millsap is out. Now, I think Millsap enjoys playing with Ilyasova. Schroeder has been playing well with Millsap and Ilyasova on the court. We're going to have Ilyasova, but we're not going to have Millsap. So we're going to have to see how he meshes with Illy and Dwight Howard for sure. But yeah, I think Elf is in play. Marcus Smart, I think his price came up. Even if he starts, his price is just too up there. I wouldn't feel comfortable playing him. Even with IT2 out, his minutes have still not been that solidified. 29 against Brooklyn, 26 against Minnesota. So I think we've seen that, even with IT2 out, it doesn't necessarily mean Smart's going to get all the run because they do have Rozier and they have other guys that could play. Derrick Rose at 61. Again, not a route I want to go. I understand it. Rose has been struggling. For a while, I was riding him because he's going to get good minutes. But even his last 2 contests, he's played 32 and 33. The Knicks have been open to giving Baker and Randall some run at the point. So I don't necessarily think you have to go there all, not with this many point guards and a tough matchup against Chris Paul. Now, I will say point guards have had success against Chris Paul lately. Since he's come back from injury, he's kind of struggled on the defensive end. But still, with Derrick Rose, particularly somebody who has to get to the rim while Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan are down there, is not somebody I'm particularly crazy about. George Hill, 6K, certainly in play. He's playing his old team, the Indiana Pacers. I think that could be kind of sneaky. The Pacers have been playing at a faster pace this season. George Hill played them once this season. 1 game, he got 48 DraftKings points. So he certainly lived by the revenge narrative at that time. It's never the same narrative-wise when you play a team for the second time, but still, at 6K, I would rather play Hill over Rose, I can tell you that. Jeff Teague has been struggling lately. He's a guy that we know has that upside, but he has been struggling. He hit 33.5 DraftKings points against Charlotte the other day. But for a while, the games that we've grown accustomed to seeing from Teague were pretty much in the 40s, and that's not what we've been getting. I don't know if it's fatigue or what it is, but his shooting percentage has been down, and his assist numbers have been okay. Even his rebounding numbers have been okay. But against Utah, a pace down spot, not somewhere I'm dying to go. But I will say that point guards have been mashing Utah lately. So it's one thing with DVP. I don't just check what it is for the season. Yeah, I do check that, but I also like to check what they're doing lately to make sure it's legit. Obviously, Brandon Jennings, Austin Rivers, you got the cheaper options. Jamal Murray certainly in play 4,800. He's been okay. His price is up at 48. It was at 49 for a couple days. When he's 4K, he's like a lock and load because he's been getting more minutes. But at 4,800, you're going to need him to get at least 20 DraftKings points to feel comfortable. Now, he's done that at least. He's done over 20 in 4 straight games, including one time he put up 35.5. That wasn't a great matchup. Against the Rockets, he played 23 minutes at home, and he got 22 DraftKings points. But he is on the road this time, and as you can see, he didn't have all that great of a time against Beverly. So he shot 30.8% from the field. But Murray's certainly in play. I'm going to move on to the shooting guard position. We talked about Harden. Bradley Beal is going to have a matchup with Avery Bradley. That should be interesting. Boston's on the back end of a back-to-back. 7,600. That's just too expensive for me to pay for Beal. It is a lot cheaper than the 82 he was just at, but I still don't feel comfortable paying 76. Will Barton 73. He's a guy that you can certainly go to, but he's shown you that even in a situation where he's going to be chucking shots, he could have bad games. He shot 15.4% from the field against Houston last time. That's pretty bad. He played 33 minutes, so the minutes are safe. But now his price went from 69 to 73. That's a significant jump. This guy's pretty much going to have to hit at 35 for you to feel comfortable with him, just to not be upset you rostered him. That's a big jump from a guy that just showed us what his floor, even without Gallo, even with those minutes, could be. So I think he's an interesting tournament play, but I wouldn't play him in cash, not at 7,300. But definitely an interesting tournament play. And, if you decide you want to play him in cash, I get it. He is small forward eligible, and he's an option. He's cheaper than Melo and some of these other guys. And he's going to chuck shots. But just remember, we just watched him in this matchup. Now, I do like Barton. I like him better for tournaments. But if you want to throw him in cash, I get it. His minutes should be there. His shot attempts should be there, so I get it. Klay Thompson, obviously a great spot. 7,200, coming off a pretty good game. Or actually, no, against Milwaukee, he didn't play all that great. He played the minutes, but he didn't play all that great. Certainly a great bounce-back spot against a poor defense in Oklahoma City. Nick Batum, certainly in a great matchup, 6,700. He's back from injury. Only played 27 minutes against Washington, which I think was a little strange. So you got to wonder about that. If we think his minutes are going to go back up to the 30s where we want them, then I would love him in this matchup against Atlanta. Although I'm sure Thabo Sefolosha will be playing, and because Bazemore is supposed to be out. So I think Thabo is going to play, and they'll probably stick Thabo on Batum. So that can make things a little tough for him. Bradley at 65, he kind of burned the world on Sunday. A lot of people went to him with IT2 out. 2 games in a row now, they've been kind of trying to ride Bradley, and he's completely dudded, despite playing big minutes. With that said, I think if IT2 comes back, that could be an interesting time to play a guy like Bradley, just because I think IT2 will take some of the attention off, and Bradley should be underowned regardless because he just burned everybody. I'd much rather play for Bradley at 65 than Smart at 64, I'll tell you that. Hardaway is certainly interesting. He should get some decent minutes with Bazemore out. They should see an interesting rotation with him and Thabo. So I certainly think he's in play. Fournier is in a great spot. I've been targeting shooting guards against Philly lately has been just clutch. And, I definitely think that that's an interesting spot. Beginning of the year, they were better at shooting guards, but lately they've been really struggling. Lou Williams and Pat Bev, you can play them both at point or shooting guard. Lou Williams, obviously a bench option with upside. Tournaments only because you don't know what you're going to get from him. Pat Bev is somebody that's interesting. He's 5'1", great matchup against Denver, although we've had 2 games with decent matchups where he hasn't really done much. So I'm not dying to go there, but I get it if you want to. Jeremy Lamb, his price is back down where it belongs because Batum is back. He's no longer a lock for those minutes. Courtney Lee against the Clippers, you can go there if you want. I wouldn't. His minutes have certainly been up there, but his consistency as far as his performance has not. Iguodala was very interesting. He should play about 30 minutes. He's been playing a lot better since he screwed everybody against Philly the other day. He's 4,600, matchup against a bad defense. I don't mind it at all, considering that lately he's been getting the minutes, so I definitely think he's interesting, worth mentioning. Joe Ingles is 5K, and I understand Hood is questionable. Even if Hood is out, you're at a point now at 5K where you're going to need him to get 25 DraftKings points. In his last 2 games, he wasn't able to do that. So I'm not so sure he'll be able to do it so easily against Indiana because they've actually been pretty good against shooting guards lately. So at 5K, I think I'm off of the Jingle Man. But if you want to go there, I get it. Redick against New York is very interesting. New York has struggled against shooting guards all year. He's 4,500. I definitely think that he's worth considering. And finally, Thabo Sefolosha, 3,900. He's underpriced. His minutes haven't been there, but I think his minutes are going to be there. And at 3,900, you really only need him to get you 20 DraftKings points. I think if he's playing at least 30 minutes, which I expect, I think he could hit that. So I do like Thabo. He's got some steal upside for sure. Moving on to small forward. Melo's 8,200. If Porzingis is out, you can look to play him. I'm not crazy about the matchup, but you could certainly look there. But if his 8,200 is expensive. If KP is in, there's no way I'm playing Melo at 82. Paul George, 8K. He's been playing great, but he's against Utah. And while I'm not worried about Gordon Hayward defense, I am a little concerned about the pace in this game as far as opportunities. I would rather play Gordon Hayward at 6,900. Paul George's defense is certainly should be respected, but it hasn't been all that great this year, and or at least not lately anyway. And I think Gordon is priced right in a decent pace spot for him. Covington I like. We talked about Batum. Covington's 68. I don't see why you wouldn't want to play him against Orlando. I don't really see anybody there that could stop him now that Ibaka's gone. Porter and Crowder should be going at it. They're both interesting, but neither of them are really moving the needle for me, to be honest. I'm sure Ariza, Kid Gilchrist, these are all guys you can consider. Terrence Ross, of course, against Philly, although he's going to have some Covington defense, I would imagine. Certainly worth considering nonetheless. Moving on to power forward. We talked about Melo. Blake is in a great spot, 81. I don't see Porzingis stopping him. I think Blake is a little too strong, but Blake hasn't been looked all that great lately. So Draymond certainly in play at 7,900. I love Dario as always. I love him in cash. Love him in all formats. There's no more Ibaka, so he's going to be playing against Aaron Gordon. So I'm not really concerned about that. Gordon's a decent defender, but he's not as strong as Ibaka. So I think Dario can do some interesting things. I like Covington and Dario both for cash. I always do, and for GPPs as well. Their teams are just relying on them for so much nowadays. Marvin Williams certainly in play with Millsap out. That opens up some rebound upside. Now he is going to have Howard down there. And Marvin Williams, he's 65. He's a guy that if you want him, if he's going to play well for you, he's going to score points. He needs rebound upside, and the matchup does get a little bit better with Millsap out as far as rebound upside. I think he should be able to get some boards over Ilyasova for sure. So assuming Ilyasova plays. If Markieff plays, he's in a great spot. If he doesn't play, you kind of have to look at Jason Smith again. Oh, was that his name? Jason Smith? I better double check that. I'm pretty sure, but Jason Smith, he's 4,200. His price came up. He's not the minimum anymore, but you would still have to consider him at that price based off the minutes he would be projected to play at that point. But yeah, I think they're interesting for sure. Ilyasova is 5K, so they did price him up with the injury news. They must have heard about it in time, so he should get a lot of minutes. I'm thinking at least 25 minimum, and we know what he's capable of. I don't know if you could trust him in cash at 5K. I mean, I think you can. He's a guy that he's pretty active, but he's 5K. He's not so cheap. Kenneth Faried, certainly interesting. He played 23 minutes against Houston last time and had a decent game at his price, so I think he's someone worth considering. Hernan Gomez, if these guys are both out again, I would certainly look to Hernan Gomez at 4,500 as some cheap options. You need some cheapies. Ryan Anderson, Taj Gibson, Matt Barnes. These are all guys that you might have to consider. Jason Smith, we know. You might have to consider these guys, so just keep that in mind. Even Amir Johnson, you're going to need some value if you're going to play Westbrook and all these other guys. Finally, at center, Jokic burned everybody who played him, including myself. He burned me pretty bad, and he only played 22 minutes against Houston. I'm not sure why. I think he got into foul trouble. He had 5 fouls. I'm certainly going to go back to the Joker. I think he's going to make sure he doesn't get in foul trouble, and I think this is a great spot for him. And I think a lot of people are going to overlook him because of Westbrook and Harden on the slate. Plus, he just burned anybody who played him the other day. Vooch is questionable. If Vooch plays, I love him against Orlando. If he is out, you have to kind of lock and load Biyombo. So I'm kind of hoping he doesn't play so we have somebody else to play. 4,500 for Bismack Biyombo. And we've seen what he's capable of with Vooch out of there. And now you throw in the fact that his matchup against Philly is even great, becomes phenomenal. So I definitely think we're going to have to pay close attention to that situation. Rudy Gobert, 7,200. Certainly in play. Dwight Horford's been playing extremely well. DeAndre Jordan's in a great spot against the Knicks. The Knicks have been horrible against centers all season. And Noah's gone, so it's going to be Hernangomez and O'Quinn. I think he's going to have his way down there. Even against Porzingis, I still think he'd have his way. Plumlee's been playing pretty great lately. I got to admit that, and on a consistent basis, he's been getting at least 30 minutes. So I think you have to consider him for sure. Capella certainly in play. Miles Turner's very cheap, although his matchup is ugly. Rashawn Holmes, 5,100. Okafor might not play. If Okafor don't play, Holmes has been playing well as it is. Over 30 DraftKings points in 4 out of his last 5, despite not cracking 30 minutes in either game, in any of those games. So you're going to want to consider him against Orlando. Orlando's terrible against centers as it is. Now, if Vooch is playing, all guns. If Vooch is playing, I'm playing Holmes. If Vooch is out, I'm playing Bismack. Does that make sense? Bismack and Holmes you could play them both if you wanted to. Play one at the utility if you have the flexibility for it. But we're gonna have to wait on the injury news. That's going to determine pretty much everything here. Like I said, if Vooch is in, I'm going with Holmes. If Vooch is out, I'm going with Bismack. Both these teams are horrible against centers defensively. Cantor and Adams, you can certainly consider them as always. Let me see. Hernangomez is 6,200. I'm not crazy about his matchup. But for tournaments, he's in play. The problem is Porzingis is back, so him and O'Quinn's minutes is really up in the air at that point. But I wouldn't rule him out completely. Anyway, that's going to do it for us for Monday's podcast. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like button. Really, really appreciate it. It means a lot to us here at WiseTake. If you're also subscribed to the channel, we're trying to grow. We got like 105 on there now. We're trying to see how high we can get it, man. We really appreciate all the love, and we appreciate the fact that you guys appreciate what we do. And if you're listening on Podbean, give us a follow. Leave us some feedback. If you're listening on iTunes, subscribe to us. Leave some comments, good or bad. I want to hear what you guys have to say. I want to make this show as good as it possibly can be for you guys. And I want you guys to rely on it. I want you guys to watch it, look forward to it every day. And that's only going to happen if I'm giving you guys what you want. So tell me what you want. If you want me to change the formats, I'm always open to suggestions. iTunes, bump us up those charts anyway. Rate us, review us. Any publicity is good publicity, right? So anyway, guys, as always, we appreciate it. I will see you guys tomorrow. And as always, good luck.
Yeah.